What up, YouTube? It's your boy Banks, and we back in the building. You feel me? It's True Talks, cause True Talks. All right, let's get straight right into it. So you already know. The other night, Thursday night, was definitely, it was obviously not the most important game, but it was an important game. Not as important as game 3. It was an opportunity to now steal one on the road. In fact, Utah actually stole both games because you were up both games and had an opportunity to actually win both games. So Utah stole it back. So it was a situation to actually, leave Utah with a 1-1, series and basically feel good and confident about yourself going home, because your home hasn't been the best home, let's be honest, for the Clippers. So it was an opportunity to at least get one. And then now, you try and play the home court advantage and have a possibility to either have it 2-2 or 3-1. But it's more favorable in your hands. But now they were down 2-0 now after that loss. And, now they have to win 2 straight at home to make it a real series, right? So, that's obviously mostly how most series go, where it's, 2-0. Because the home team protects home court, and now you go home, protect your home court, and it's 2-2. This is the typical, old-fashioned series that we see, but it's different context because, like I said, Clippers haven't been protecting their home, so that's why people are worried, and some people are like, oh my God, the Jazz, and they're overreacting, but not really, right? Because of the history that we saw with the Clippers, right, from the last series versus the Mavs. So, obviously that's the context now with this 2-0 lead. Can you go down 2-0 in multiple series and still go to the conference finals? Now, it's possible because, again, we know the Clippers aren't a regular 4th seed. Their team is the makeup of like a 1 seed or 2 seed, right? But the West is tough, so the seedings don't really matter in the West, right? But at some point, like, there's going to be, we have to talk about some things because, like, the Clippers' habits in terms of, one, Kawhi being passive, right? And some of it was passive and some of it was padded, right? But Kawhi being passive, obviously. Then you got PG with his struggles. And even this game, his percentages and everything filled out. But I'm going to talk about the mental aspect with PG, obviously. But, you can see with PG, just even how he shoots the ball, like, just struggling in general. He's not the same PG that we normally know of, right? But at the end of the day, like, it's you have that component. So you have Kawhi being passive, you have PG, not being PG. Then you have, you have this kind of like looming cloud, or just their energy in terms of starting out the gate and just defensively, how they're not on a string, how they're not attentive to detail, how they're not, they're not just moving like with that sense of urgency that you normally would see a team that's like they feel like they could go to the finals, or they're like a solid team or a great team, how they move, coming defensively on a string, physicality, attentive to detail. They know, okay, for this person, the KYP, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and they just move on a string, and there's no confusion. There's probably, there's limited amount of confusion and miscommunication. And it's funny how it's ironic, and that's what you see from the Nets, which is why the Nets have surprised people in padding the Bucks, how they've padded the Bucks. The Bucks have been a top 5 offense the whole regular season, and now look what they're doing. All 3 games, they're struggling offensively, and it's funny that you have to talk about the Nets struggle offensively for one game, but the defense has been padding all 3 games. Not only that, even versus Celtics, defense has been padding. So when you look at it from that perspective, like you just see a sense of urgency from the Nets. You see, a defensive string. You see attention to detail, like not that much miscommunication. Just they're moving properly, how a championship team is supposed to move. And you're not seeing that from the Clippers, and that's 2 straight years now. And that's why you've seen Doc be able to say it's going to be the same thing even without me, because now you have to now really talk about, is it really the coaching staff and the principles that they're running in terms of defensive assignments and, schemes and all that type of stuff? Or is it really just the players they're just low IQ players? Like, is it one of those? Because it can't be 2 different head coaches and some changes in the coaching staff, and it's the same results in terms of we're going to play lackadaisical, and then we're going to try and turn it on. And then, like, that's what you see from them defensively a lot. You saw that in the Mavs series. You saw that last year in both series in the Mavs and the Nuggets. For them to even verse the Nuggets go up in double-digit leads, and then now all of a sudden they can't lock up and, they're losing 3 straight games with a double-digit lead. Like, you're seeing that, or you saw that. And then now you're seeing that here again, the same thing the next year, even with different coaching staff. So at some point, we have to actually assess and update your information in terms of some of these players. It's why people are saying PG and Kawhi, y'all say you're defending players and this and that. Like, it's cap. Are you guys really defending? Pat Bev, whatever the case is, the lineups. The only one who you see consistently lock up is T-Man. So maybe he gets more minutes. I don't know. But, we'll talk about what transpired and what are the solutions or the things that need to improve for game 3. Because if you go down 3-0, we saw that with the Suns and the Nuggets. If you're supposed to win this game and you don't come correct and you get blown out or, you're losing, right? That you're not coming back from 3-0. Come on, let's be real. So let's go into that context because I gave you that context. Let's go straight right into it, boy. So obviously, I'm not going to do a full, the breakdown that I normally do, but I'm going to break down like I normally do. So I'm going to show clips. I'm going to show things that I'm talking about because we're going to talk about this game in chronological order and see what transpired and where the issues are and what I didn't like and things that I did like and things that what's wrong with this team, right? So let's actually go into it. So obviously to start, like I said before in the last video, I know people were saying it's cap, you shouldn't do it. But, they obviously started Zubas like I expected because, again, those offensive rebounds, you can get a stop all you want, but those offensive rebounds, those tapbacks, it's actually guaranteed 8, 9 times out of 10 when you have Gobert. And even if Mans is boxing him out, he could just tap it over you. He could jump. He's taller than you, 7'1", while Mans are pinched. You box out. You have so much height to get to even touch the ball. He could just tap it before it gets to you, right? And slap back the Tyson Chandler. So you saw a lot of that. So obviously you want to erase that because even if you do get a stop, it's what's the purpose of you running small ball to get a stop if they keep getting second chance opportunities, then you get threes off of offensive rebounds in this NBA. It's not like it's layups, right? So it's a backbreaker. But, obviously they started Zubats. And I said, do the drop coverage, which I expected them to do, and, do the drop coverage. But when I say do the drop coverage, I'm thinking they're going to use IQ in how they do the drop coverage. Not from Zubats. Zubats is still playing it perfectly. You want him to sag back because, again, the lob threat and the roll threat is something that is obviously something you want to cut off in terms of Rudy, right? But force them to shoot mid-range and stuff like that. These guys, the way they're actually playing the screen individually from a defender standpoint is just horrendous. It's actually just atrocious. And this is what I was saying. That's why you've seen Donovan Mitchell from the get-go splashing, shooting threes, because the way the Mans are not attached to him off the screen. They're getting hit by the screen and giving him, you have to be able to go over the screen to where now you force him to put you on his hip, right? You're still attached to him. You don't just give airspace when you go through the screen that now he has so much space to pull in the gaps. And now it's looking like the drop coverage is Fugazi. You can't run that against Mitchell and you're overreacting to the results because Mitchell is just splashy if you ask me, right? And that's what you saw in the first quarter and out the gate. And that's why they now, okay, you know what, let's change it. Let's run small ball. Let's do, but then you saw with Cousins, it was working. It's just who's playing the screen. You have to use IQ. And this is why you see, and that's what they did with the Mitchell, but this is why you see perfect examples like the Nets, right? The Nets were doing the same drop coverage because when Giannis is setting the screen, he's not a popper, so you don't have to switch. You could get away with the drop coverage because he's going to roll to the paint and his roll threat is a high threat. It's the main threat. So you want to cut it off. So drop coverage cuts off one aspect of it and you force a mid-range because out of the two, it's either you switch and you get a mismatch and it's killed, or, you hedge hard and you get the roll and it's killed. But the way you do the reason for the drop coverage is it's pick and poison. We rather you shoot a mid-range shot than get a guaranteed lob. So we cancel one part of this pick and roll, right? And you have to make the harder or the more difficult shot instead of giving you the more easier shot. And then we only hedge tight or switch based off if you're potent with the mid-range. So perfect example, if you look at the Nets, they run the same drop coverage, but they don't run it how Fugazi and lazily how the Clippers run it. They actually are. Everybody else is playing as a string offensively. They're gapping. They're shrinking the floor. So he only has a small window to pull. Not only that, you've seen Bruce Brown, especially when Middleton, you know how he can pull the mid-range. Or even Kyrie when he's guarding Drew Holiday, they can pull the mid-range. But what do? They actually guard the pick so they're tight and attached to the pick that when they go over the screen, the guy has to shield them. So now he's not focused on just shooting the shot because he's on your back. He could just block you, right? So you have to shield him and then try and either get a floater or try and step back or whatever. And then now he redirects and covers every single ground. So he cancels that 1 second window by doing the shield and putting you on, being on his hip and being attached to him. So now he can't just freely pull. So now he has to shot create. And then by the time he shots creates, what happens? Bruce Brown gets back in time and Middleton's whole pick and roll is canceled. That's what I expect from the drop coverage. And it's not from the Zubats. It's not coming from the center position or the guy who's guarding the screen and roll or guarding the roller. It's coming from the attachment that you want to see from the original primary defender on the pick and roll, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, that's what I was expecting. That's picture perfect drop coverage defense. And it's funny and it's ironic that you see that from the Nets and you're not seeing that from the Clippers. You would think the Clippers would have IQ to do that, right? But it's like you saw in the clips with the Mitchell, they're not doing that. They're obviously, what are they doing? They're just getting stuck on the screen or playing the screen lazily. That now he's literally no one's attached to Mitchell, and he's even getting threes. The fact that he's even getting threes off the drop coverage, at least get a mid-range, but he's getting a three. That means you're not even attached to him. You're nowhere to be found. The screen is actually working. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, are you serious right now? Like, that's where I'm like, okay, they're playing the screen fugazi. Then not only that, the guys who are in help position are actually just not even, they're attached to their guy. Instead of gapping, forcing a pass that by the time the pass gets to whoever it's getting to, you have time to actually get back and contest, right? That's what you want from a drop coverage. It's a team defense type of thing. You don't just leave guys on an island. And it's funny, the drop coverage was not working or whatever, and people are like, obviously it's like run the small ball, whatever. And then what happened? They still went down, right? They went down. They were down, what? I think 19 or whatever it was. I think 57-76, right? So now what happened during that stretch? They went to a zone, which is still, it was like a matchup zone. It wasn't just an outright zone, but it was a matchup zone, right? And when you run the matchup zone, you're still kind of guarding a man in your area. So it's a matchup zone. It's not like just a straight zone where you only guard the area, right? But what they were doing was it's a matchup zone, and it still kind of like a drop coverage, essentially, right? And that's what you saw. But what was the difference in this one? You see the guys dropping and trying to help in the mid-range area, so he can't just pull. So you're canceling the mid-range ability. You saw that versus Clarkson. You saw that in that stretch where they went on a 9-0 run. They cut the lead all the way down to 6. Defensively, they were locking up, and they only scored one bank three or whatever, or 1-3 with, Clarkson on Zubats. But other than that, they were padding in the same drop coverage. So it's not like the drop coverage don't work. It's how do you do it? You have to do it, properly. You can't just do it lazily. You'll get exposed. These guys are too talented in the NBA, especially when you have true shot creators that will pull the midi. They're too talented in the NBA to get away with the drop coverage. Like, you can't just do that fugazily. You have to do it with IQ. So when you don't do it with IQ, it's work. It's easy work. But on the second half, people thought that they just switched to small ball and all of a sudden they came back. No. Zubats was in the game when they came back and cut it to 6. Zubats was in the game continuously doing the same thing. He didn't switch. He didn't do anything. He was doing the same thing, and he came up a little bit higher and suddenly went back. But other than that, a lot of the times he was doing the same drop coverage. So the drop coverage wasn't the issue. It's how they're doing it, which is the issue. And I don't expect them to move this fugazi. I don't, to be honest. Especially if you have defensive-minded players, like, it doesn't make sense, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, now they did switch again to small ball. And it's something with the Clippers. It's like the Clippers, if they're not in small ball, where they're now, if they're not in a switch everything type of defense, it's like their brain doesn't work. I don't understand. It's like their IQ doesn't click. Like, they only move attentive and be aggressive. And you saw, too, in the drop coverage, too, they were more physical. They were more physical in that drop coverage, right? In that, with Zubats in on that run. They were attaching to D-Mitch from time. They weren't, that's exactly how I expected them to run it. But anyways, it's like they only move correctly when they're in a switch everything offense. When they know it's small ball, okay, we can switch everything. It's like their brain can't think more than one thing. So in the drop coverage, you have to know, okay, with this guy, we do drop coverage. But if this guy sets a screen, we switch. Like, it's like they only could work when their mind tells them, guys, switch everything. So it's just boom, 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 boom. It's like they could only move properly in that type of scheme. Like, it doesn't, bro, it's just, I guess it's a testament to just, they're not I guess maybe they're not high IQ or they just don't have defensive chemistry, so they can only do one thing. And that's what you see in terms of defensive chemistry. But whatever, they can only do one thing, which is basically the small ball. And then they started boxing out well. Kawhi would box out if they switch, and Reggie is on Rudy. Then they'll push Reggie Jackson to the corner and have Kawhi drop down, or have PG drop down, or Marcus Morris drop down. And they tried to have a bigger body on Rudy Gobert. They were boxing out, and they were still getting one rebound. They weren't allowing offensive rebounds and tap So they played their best small ball lineup down the stretch, and then that's when you seen, offensively, it transpired. And they were hitting shots. PG was aggressive. Reggie Jackson was aggressive. And they went up 101-99. And that was in the small ball. They were playing great defense. But then what happens? That's what I'm saying. It literally isn't, for the Clippers, it's not like they could run a drop coverage off defense and play it well. They could run a small ball lineup and play it well. Their problem defensively is that they always suss something. They always, after a while, it's like they don't try, or they just miscommunicate, or now this happened and this happens. Perfect example in the small ball lineup. Switch everything. The only one we don't switch with is Luke Kennard. He'll do his touch and then go back, right? His hard hedge and go back. That's what he'll do every single time. But everybody else, we switch everything. But then sometimes, now all of a sudden, what happens? A double. Randomly, they double it. Rudy Gobert, hey, punch. Randomly, they miscommunicate on a switch, and one guy's not switching, and then, so now it's another double. Or randomly, they switch late, or you know what I mean? Or Luke Kennard stays too long, or they just always suss something, even in their perfect small ball lineup. And then they still were allowing buckets down the stretch, and that's why they went on a run. And then on the other hand, obviously, the Clippers couldn't buy a bucket. And then that's when the game was lost. They were still in the small ball. So it's literally you can't pick your hand and basically say whatever defense they run, there's just one defense they run that they'll actually pad 100% straight through. And that's why I always bring up the Nets, because I'm like, this is a team that they said had no defense. And look, you see them attentive to detail, follow their game plan. So now, even though they don't overreact to Middleton scoring or Giannis scoring or whatever, because the game plan, how they viewed the game plan going in, this is the most IQ thing to do. It's the lesser of two evils. Yes, there might be times where they have a burst of going to work, but we don't change our game plan. We don't overreact to what they're doing, because at the end of the day, we had this game plan for a reason. Don't overreact. They'll fall back down to their average. We'll force them to their weakness. They can't snap in their weakness all the time. This is what we want them to do. It's the lesser of two evils. They're not going to be efficient and potent with it. And then what happens? They come back to normal. They come back to life, even though they were getting slapped at the beginning. And how do you have 30 points in the first quarter, but yet you only have 50 points for the next 3 quarters? Why? Because it was padded. It's the same thing. You're not going to, you know what I mean? You stick to your game plan. So that's where you don't see. That's why I rate the coaching staff from the Nets. You don't see the Clippers stick to the game plan, especially if it's a smart one. If it's not a smart one and you're just playing, then yes, you can adjust your game plan. It's not working, whatever. Yes. But you know your personnel with all of these players. You know that at the end of the day, what is the main thing with the Jazz? What is the main thing with the Jazz? When they hit their threes, when they're splashing, with any team, all these teams in the NBA now, when they're hitting threes, especially if they're a 3-point potent shooting team, when they're hitting threes, that's when it's an onslaught. That's when now you're probably going to get a blowout. That's when it's tougher to beat them. When they're clicking on the 3-point line with all cylinders. So what do? Yes, even though they might hit 5 straight mid-range jump shots or whatever, you don't overreact, because at the end of the day, you're picking something and you're giving up something that you would want them to shoot out of all. And they're not going to always hit that eventually, because that's not their game. Yes, they might do a mid-range in this bucket, 5 straight. Okay. But stick to the game plan. You had that game plan for a reason, because now when you overreact to that, now again, they're going to get either the lob threat, or now you have to switch everything out. You double team, whatever. Now they're going to get catch and shoot 3. Come on now. You have to pick poison. You have to, you stick to the proper game plan. Don't overreact. Run it at least for a half. Come on. You know what I mean? And that's what they don't do. They overreact. So when I say KYP, when I say in-game adjustments, the times they should be doing in-game adjustments, they don't do. And then the ones they should actually wait for at least a half before you do an in-game adjustment, they do too early. And it's okay, at the end of the day, it's just, you can't run any defense. That's what it comes down to. Any defense they try to run, you can't really run if mans aren't attentive. They're on a string. There's no defensive chemistry. There's too much miscommunication. You get what I'm saying? Any defense you run will work in bursts, but it won't work in the grand scheme. And that's what you see. They try so many different defensive drop coverage. Okay, we're going to switch. Okay, we're going to double Mitchell. Oh, we're going to... They try so many different things. The same thing with Luka. Oh, we're going to do this. Oh, we're going to do this. Oh, but when you're not on the string, it looks fugazi. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. There's going to be holes. You're going to give up easy shots. You're going to... That's what you see with the Clippers. And it's frustrating because that's not indicative for a championship type of team. That's not. At some point, you count your blessings that you're winning these games and, Kawhi carries or whatever. But at some point, you're going to get upset if this is the way you play. You can't keep going down and keep going down and keep going down and expect to do something spectacular. Like, it doesn't work like that. Rarely do you see that happen, right? Rarely do you see that happen. So when you look at it from that perspective and you look at it like basically like obviously what also transpired now. Now let's look at the offense side of things, right? In the clutch. And after that run, and they went up what? They ended up going up. They went up 5 or something like that, right? 2 or they went up 2 or they went up 5. I think it was 85-80. They went up something, right? And what did you see? What did you actually see now in the end part of the game? You started to see like Kawhi being passive, and a part of it is Kawhi being passive, right? But another part of it is Kawhi being padded. Bogdanovich put a clinic, and this was a guy who actually rolled his ankle earlier, right? With his left foot landed on Cousins. He started padding Kawhi. Let's be honest. He had girth. He had he had some girth, and he played great size. He cut off right, he cut off, he's going right, he cut off, he's going left, he cut off, both ways, and he was doing elite defense. And at the end of the day, what was happening? He was forcing Kawhi to pass. People will look at it just, why Kawhi, why you passing? He padded what Kawhi wanted to do. Kawhi wanted to run into the paint, cut that off. Wanted to do some type of shot creative move, cut that off. Great defense. He was there on one of his post fades. Like, he was playing great defense, let's be honest. And I know obviously it's like Bogdanovich padding. Bogdanovich played great defense on LeBron too as well when he faced the Pacers and they went 7 games. Obviously, LeBron still went to work and went off. Obviously, he screens or whatever. But Bogdanovich played pretty good defense on him. You know what I'm saying? But LeBron was obviously better. But that's what Kawhi, you're going to have to obviously be better. It's not a guy that you're just going to easily kill. What happened to, like, you can't just only kill with Luka on you. Kill like you killed when you had Finney on you as well, too. Do the same thing as you could see. It's like, you could see this. And it's the same thing. Like, I'm starting to see, like, I don't know, maybe it's Kawhi's, his like, the fatigue factor in terms of going 7 games and not having, ample amount of rest. Not having ample amount of rest. So that's why you see him, just having fatigue and being tired and stuff like that. And you could see like his legs. He's more lethargic and all of that in his play. So when you see that, obviously, you're going to look and you're going to be like, okay, he doesn't have the spring bounce in his step. He doesn't have the diddy bop going on. He doesn't have all of that. So, he's obviously going to struggle in the fourth. He's going to struggle with creating. He's going to struggle if it's not as easy. You can see it. Like his lift isn't there. You know what I mean? So you could see like it affecting him down the stretch. And that's what happens when you have to play high minutes. That's what happens when you play with your food. You know what I'm saying? You play with your food in terms of the Mavs. You go 7 games. You won 2 straight. You're supposed to win that game 5 at home and finish in 6 games. And if you finish in 6 games, maybe you do, or you probably will get 1 extra day of rest. 2 extra days of rest. You would get that. So it would help you in this series. Now, literally, you go 7 games, and ever since then, it's still 1 day rest game. 1 day rest game. Now it's about to be 1 day rest game 3. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you can't use that fatigue as an excuse no more. You have to fight through. So, I don't like what I saw from Kawhi in terms of there's no way if you're that elite that Bogdanovich should pad you. Now, Bogdanovich has better D than most people think, like I was saying. But there's no way, mano that he should be padding you. There's no absolute way. Like, come on now. If you're that guy, that can't happen. That actually can't happen. You're supposed to fry him and you're supposed to want to switch. You're supposed to want to, like, Royce O'Neal should be the guy like a Finney Smith padding you. Bogdanovich should not be padding you. If Kawhi is Kawhi, he shouldn't be. And that's what you saw. And then obviously some of it was random, like low, intense doubles, not really aggressive doubles, just like gap type of doubles. And then he passed to shooters who were open and they just missed, right? They missed open shots. Like you saw with the Nets, they missed open shots and they went cold at the wrong time, right? But at the end of the day, like, that's one side of it where you're like, the offense in terms of just that is fugazi. And if you look at it, the Jazz, I don't really like obviously the Clippers had a bad, like they shot 47% from the field, which isn't terrible. 36%, 38% from three, which isn't terrible, right? It's just mainly the defense. Like you allowed 55% from the field and 51% from three. Like that, come on now. Like that is elite offense from Utah. And you allowed that, and you still lost by 6, and you still had a chance to win the game at the end. So what does that tell you? That's a positive thing, that like you haven't played your best defensively and you haven't played your best offensively, and yet you still have lost these games by small. Like there was a window where you could have won these games, right, in the fourth, in the clutch. So that's a positive thing. But at the end of the day, like offensively too, let's look at PG. Like PG is another one. Like there's no way that Reggie Jackson is looking like the 1B. Like there's no way. Like Reggie Jackson is going 11 for 19, 29 points. Like, you know what I mean? Like obviously Paul George had 27 points, 8 for 18. A lot of it was running into the paint and stuff like that, and he was playing better in certain stretches. But overall, like you're looking at the shots he's been missing. Like you're looking at him, just look at his demeanor. And it's coming to a point where like it's getting to his head in terms of Paul George. Like you got to look at what's the context with Paul George. He's always played great with Indiana, right? He's played great with Indiana. This pandemic P stuff he was always known as playoff P for a reason. Like he has increased his game in the playoffs. But what happened when he first went to OKC first year, right? They look at it as, oh, he had a terrible playoffs, and he did have a bad playoffs in terms of what they were facing, the Jazz or whatever, and they lost to a Donovan Mitchell with Melo, Westbrook, and that was rookie Donovan Mitchell. Lost to a Melo, Westbrook, and, with Paul George on your team. And that one was more so play style, fit clash. Like, Westbrook was doing all this type of stuff and chucking, and PG was at a rhythm. Like, they were playing off ball, him and Melo not getting the ball. Like, there was a fit clash, right? And a play style clash in terms of what was going on. But, that's why I didn't really think too much of that one. But in the next year, obviously, it's just now there's a stigma on him. And he actually played pretty good in the Portland series when they lost. But, the whole bye-bye and the whole salty response of that's a bad shot. Now, again, now you have 2 straight years of something negative that people are roasting you for. Then now you go to the Clippers and first year now with all this pressure on you guys, right? And then now what happens? Paul George, they have a pandemic P. It's a pandemic P situation. And that one was actually, he played atrocious in the bubble. And why did he now say he had anxiety or had depression and had he was dealing with a lot of these things? Because what happened in the bubble, you're not surrounded by family. It's the first time he's probably, even in the playoffs, going on social media like that and engaging in that and actually being, because that's all you could do. You're in your room, right? And that's where now he's actually probably for the first time seen all the negativity that they've been saying about him. Like you see it in you know what I mean? But you don't really, it's kind of like you see it in passes, like whatever, I see it, but you kind of have motivation to debunk that. But now it's like everybody's seeing it. And then he's even people are talking crazy. They think stuff is sweet. Like the way Devin Booker was talking to him even earlier in the season because of the pandemic P. Like people don't rate you like that. Like there's it's real. And he's actually diving into all of this. So now it affects his psyche. So mentally, PG, that's why I always say there's different breeds in terms of mental aspect of this game. Like certain people can actually engage in all the media and actually be comfortable. Like that's why Katie is so different. Katie is someone who can talk smack on Twitter, engage in all the narratives, see what they all talking about him all day, every day, and he sees it all. And yet in the finals with all the, negative, cloud and pressure on him for everyone wanting him to lose, he could still average 30 and wins finals MVP on high efficiency, 50+% and all this type of stuff. Like nothing changes whether he sees it or not. He's still going to drop on your buckets on your beam. Like that's why he's a different breed. That's even another dynamic that people don't even take in or pay attention to. So you look at PG, like him engaging in this mentally, like there's different breeds of mental game. There's different mental aspects. There's different breeds of mental. Like everyone's an alpha. To make the league, you have to be strong mental. You have to have strong mentality to do with that whole rigorous, media at you, fans and all that type of stuff. But it's a different breed when you get into the league and when everyone's an alpha. But once you get in a room with 10 alphas, we really see who the alpha is, right? There's different levels to alphas. There's different levels. Like I'm an alpha, but when you get into a room, now there's other alphas. Now, okay, who's really the alpha? You get that alpha, now gets into another room with alphas like him. Now who's really the alpha? Like there's levels to everything. And that's what you're seeing with these guys when they get to the league. Like, everyone is mentally strong and stuff like that to even get to the league and make it, right? It's a small sample size. It's a small, to even be an elite superstar in the league. Like, it's a crop that's only cut for the few guys who are already mentally capable of being on this level. But now when you now look at it, and now you go further now, okay, in PG comparison to the KD, to all these other guys, Kyrie is someone who also gets media, reckless negativity with the media, but you see it doesn't affect his play. So, like, you look at that, even LeBron is one of them as well too, right? You look at that, and you're like, okay, there's levels to this. So, PG, like, you can see even with his shot, like, you can see him, he's like aiming on his shot. He's not just shooting it. He's aiming. Like, you see it before. Normally when he shoots, he'll shoot it, and even sometimes he does quick release and stuff like that. Every time now he shoots, it's like he's hoping it goes in. He's not like he's trying to will it in. He's trying to like hope and pray that it goes in. He's not shooting it with confidence. He's not shooting it like, oh, I'm hitting this. Are you dumb, Sag? I got it, bucket. Like, he's not shooting it. And even when he scores, he doesn't even celebrate. He's like, not celebrate, but how PG has that demeanor. Like, come on, now let's go. He like high fiving guys, and like you don't see that confidence from you don't see that demeanor. You don't see nothing from that from PG. Just like he's in his head. He literally is in his head. He's overthinking on every shot. Like, even when he scores, it's kind of like, whew, that went in. Like, it's a sigh of relief. It's not like, oh, I'm about to hit this. You see that demeanor from PG. And that's why you see him look even more atrocious than he normally looks. And that because it's in his head. He's like, now he's literally, every time he's playing, he's thinking pandemic P, or they're going to roast me, or if I miss this shot. Like, you could see that in his head. You could see that. The bubble was probably the worst thing that could happen for him, because he never was like this. Never did I see him aim like this. Like, every shot, like, his aiming, holding his release, and like, it's just atrocious, man. And like, you could see it's affecting him. And that's where it's like, PG, you got to like find a way, like, talk to one of your boys, do something, snap out of it. You have to snap out of it, because it's like, Reggie Jackson is looking more like a 1B. Reggie Jackson is shooting aggressively. Reggie Jackson is shots. People are like, oh my God, Reggie, what are you doing? Splash. Like, people are trusting Reggie more than they're trusting PG. And even now, to the point where PG doesn't even have bad games, but it looks like a bad game. Because it's like he doesn't look the same. There's the times he's making these shots is sporadic, right? It's like small bursts of 3 shots and then 4 bricks. And like, you know what I mean? So it doesn't look like your good game doesn't look like a good game. So PG has to snap out of it, because at some point, yes, Kawhi should be the one carrying. But if you're also a superstar talent. Like, it's not supposed to be a one. It's not like you're not supposed to be like a Siakam or your number 2 option, and you're supposed to be a 1B. You're supposed to be. It's sometimes I'm even carrying. Sometimes you're carrying. It's supposed to be like that hierarchy. It's supposed to be like that. You know what I mean? And like, that's what, like, that dynamic, like, literally exactly how you see from KD and Kyrie, like, that's what you're supposed to be getting from these two. But Reggie Jackson is outperforming PG. Like, Marcus Morris games is outperforming PG. Like, come on now. Like, it's at some point, PG, you have to wake up, man. Kawhi has to wake up. PG has to wake up. And that's why it's frustrating with the Clippers. Every other game is like, you have to yell at them and say, wake up. Wake up. You can't be doing that every time, man. Like, you can't be, man. At some point, wake yourself up. Do I really have to always wake you up? Don't you have your own alarm clock? Like, wake up yourself. At some point, you have to. And that's what you're waiting, especially from PG. That's what you're waiting. You're waiting for, I know all he needs is one breakout game in the playoffs. And it's sad to even say that for a guy of his caliber. But PG, like, you could see, if he gets one, you're just hoping one day he just gets 1 30-point splash and efficiency elite game, where it's not just paint. We're talking about he's shooting, doing the step backs, like, he's killing like that. One of those games and floodgates. Right? That's what you're hoping for, and that's what you're waiting for. But how long can you wait? How long can you wait? And when it does happen, is it too late to apologize? Is it too late? You know what I'm saying? Like, come on now. So we'll see. We'll see, obviously, how that transpires. But, I didn't like what I saw from them, like, especially Kawhi and PG offensively, right? PG, I did like how he's attacking. But, again, overall in these 2 games, like, he's been having some struggles, right? And Kawhi just being passive and not being the same. And if they want to win Game 3, that's what they have to do. Again, the solution for Game 3 now is either whatever defense you decide to do, whether it's the drop coverage, you play like I showed how Bruce Brown played it, right? And you force him, like, that. I'm telling you, that would work, because you're going to force them to shoot contested or shot creating shots. right, in the mid-range, and only Clarkson and Mitchell shoot it at that level, right? Bogdanovich can here and there, but only Clarkson and Mitchell shoot at that level. But even then, I'd rather them do that than have catch and shoot easy threes and open threes and drives to the layups, because that now makes their shooting even go further. And then now you have to react to their drive, and now other shooters open. Like, it's too much chain reaction off of those things. The only thing that literally has no chain reaction is just you and your 2 points is that. That's why I was saying do the drop coverage. That's the reason why I was saying do that. Like exactly what Bruce Brown and the Nets did to Middleton. Do that. And even if it's just you, even if it's, I'm telling you, if Mitchell and Clarkson are the ones going off, you could still beat them. We've seen Donovan Mitchell, even in the bubble, we've seen Donovan Mitchell like have 45s, have 50s, and still lose. We've seen that, because the difference is with Mitchell, it's not necessarily his assists, but when the other team, when the shooters are hidden, that's where the floodgates happen. It's the same thing with Jokic. When he's passing and the shooters are hidden, that's when the floodgates happen with the Nuggets. It's the same thing with the Jazz. Like, they're a real solid team with Donovan Mitchell being their superstar. But Donovan Mitchell, when you have Donovan Mitchell scoring and you have them, that's when it's floodgates. But if you have Donovan Mitchell struggling and it's only just them, or you have Donovan Mitchell just going off by himself, when you have one of those, that's when you could beat them. And this is what people don't, they don't play the long game. They just overreact to, oh, this and that. Man, if Mitchell's going off and he has 40, but everybody else is struggling, and they have to shoot contested shots and they're missing, I'm not like, let him have 40. Like, you don't let him, but obviously you want him to have an inefficient 40. But even if he has an efficient 40, like, they're not going to win the game. You're going to be in a game. You have a chance to win. But when he's struggling and they're snapping, like, again, you have a chance to win, so you have to pick one. Or you can't have both happen where they're hitting shots and Mitchell is snapping. Like, that's recipe for disaster. And that's why they have to figure out what game plan they want to use. I say still do the drop and do it the way I say and like I showed. Or if not, then do the small ball lineup, switch everything, and force Mitchell to create one-on-one. Even if Kennard gets switched onto him, tell Kennard to play great defense. Make Reggie Jackson play great defense. And at the end of the day, you have someone sitting in the paint. So even if you want to force him to the paint, now that paint guy has to just properly know how to contest and not give up the lob or whatever. And then the guy from the corner now help the rebound, and everyone gang rebound. You could do that as well too, right? Do one or the other and play it aggressively and with physicality. And that's the recipe for success. And then offensively, Kawhi has to be Kawhi, and then everything else will fall into place. And that's the recipe. That's the game 3 solution. And you need to do that out the gate. Demoralize them. Now you're at home. You know what I'm saying? That's what you need to do. But again, it's the Clippers, so you never know what Clippers you're gonna get. So we'll see how it pans out. But at the end of the day, we'll see. We'll see, man. Bro, it's unfortunate that it's like this, but that's why my stress levels don't rise, because I expect this from the Clippers, man. I expect doo-doo from the Clippers, and I also expect greatness. So when one or the other happens, I don't really waver that much as most people, because I'm still confident, because I know that at any time they could go like this. So that's what holds me. But this is why coming into the playoffs, I always had a 5-level radar, because, and then now you have Ibaka who's completely gone. Like, you know what I mean? Well, he wasn't being played anyways, and they were still winning. So it's not like, you can't win without him. But, we'll see how they move. Man.